The clinking of silverware was the only sound in the room. We were all gathered around the long dining table, plates of food untouched, the smell of roasted chicken and spices filling the air. I thought it would be just another family dinner, the kind where my father asked about the business, and my mother reminded me to eat more. But that night was different. My father cleared his throat, the way he always did before making an announcement. "Your mother and I have made a decision," he said, his eyes moving across the table but not stopping on. His hand rested on Daniel's shoulder, and I felt a strange knot form in my chest. "We've decided Daniel will take over as CEO of the company." The words hit me like cold water. I blinked, unsure if I had heard correctly. For years I had poured myself into that business. Late nights, early mornings, sacrifices no one even asked me to make. I thought it was leading to something, to trust, to recognition. But in one sentence, everything I believed was swept aside. Daniel leaned back in his chair with a smug little smile. "I'll do my best," he said casually, as if this was always meant to be. My parents smiled proudly at him, their eyes full of approval I had never once seen directed at me. I forced myself to stay quiet, but my heart pounded in my chest. Heat spread through my face, and I stared down at my plate, pushing food around with my fork. I wanted to speak, to ask why not me? But the words stuck in my throat. My father's voice carried on, explaining how Daniel had the vision and energy the company needed. Each word felt like a blade cutting deeper. My mother glanced at me only once, her expression unreadable, then turned back to Daniel as if I wasn't even there. I felt small, like a guest at my own family's table. Inside, I was breaking apart. Betrayal burned in my chest, mixing with shame. Was I really that invisible to them? Did all my years of loyalty mean nothing? My stomach turned, and the food in front of me tasted like ash. I looked across the table at my younger brother, his grin stretching wider. He didn't even need to say anything. I could read it in his eyes. "You lost." I won. And in that moment, I realized the ground beneath my life was no longer steady. Everything I thought I knew about family, trust, and love had shifted. Dinner was still going on, voices still talking, but for me the room had gone silent. That was the night everything changed. Before that dinner, my life had been built around the family business. I grew up in its halls, learning from the ground up, starting with the smallest tasks no one else wanted to do. While my friends chased careers in other cities or built their own paths, I stayed. I told myself it was loyalty, but deep down, it was also hope. Hope that one day my parents would see me, trust me, and believe I was worthy of leading what they had created. I was the oldest, and with that came responsibility. At least, that's what I thought. When the company struggled during hard years, I was the one who stepped in, stayed late, balanced accounts, and even gave up opportunities outside just to keep things running. There was a time when I wanted something else, a career in architecture. I loved design, creating, building something new from nothing. But when my father asked me to help out at the office for a while, I agreed. A while turned into months, then years, until that dream of mine disappeared into the background. Meanwhile, Daniel, my younger brother, never seemed weighed down by any of it. He was the golden child, charming, confident, the kind of person who walked into a room and made everyone notice. While I stayed late at the office, Daniel went out with friends, made connections at parties, and lived without work. He was reckless, yes. He gambled, spent too much, and made promises he couldn't keep. But none of it seemed to matter to my parents. They always found ways to excuse him. "He's just young," my mother would say. "He'll grow into it." My father would laugh at Daniel's mistakes, saying, "That's how leaders learn." When I made mistakes, they weren't treated as lessons. They were failures. A small error in a report, a missed detail in a meeting. My father would frown, my mother would sigh. I learned quickly to be careful, to double-check everything, to carry the weight of responsibility because no one else would. But even in those years, I held on to patience. I believed that if I kept giving, if I kept sacrificing, my parents would see my worth. I didn't complain when Daniel was praised for things I quietly fixed behind the scenes. I didn't protest when he was given opportunities while I was told to stay steady and be supportive. There were moments, though, when the truth slipped through, like the time my father introduced us at a business dinner. "This is Daniel, my youngest. He's got real vision," he said with pride. Then, almost as an afterthought, "And this is Michael. He helps keep things running." It stung, but I smiled as I always did. My mother wasn't much different. She adored Daniel openly, bragged about his charm, his easy way with people. With me, she offered polite nods, small acknowledgments, but never the warmth she poured on him. I was dependable. Daniel was special. Still, I stayed. I told myself family came first. I told myself patience would pay off. I told myself love and loyalty would be enough. But slowly, something began to change in me. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, a dull ache that grew sharper with time. I noticed how invisible I felt at the dinner table when Daniel was around. I noticed how my ideas at work were brushed aside until Daniel repeated them, and suddenly they were brilliant. I noticed how, no matter what I did, my parents' eyes always turned toward him with pride while I was left in the shadows. I swallowed those feelings, buried them deep, because I didn't want bitterness to take over. I believed that my moment would come. I thought my loyalty was being seen, even if they didn't say it aloud. That's why the announcement at dinner cut so deeply. Because all those years of sacrifice, all the times I put the family above myself, were supposed to mean something. Instead, it felt like they had only made me invisible. Looking back, maybe I should have seen it earlier. Maybe I should have realized the pattern long ago. But when you love your family, you blind yourself to the truth. You convince yourself that your time will come. For me, that belief was broken in a single night. After the dinner, I couldn't sleep. The words kept replaying in my mind. My father's announcement, Daniel's grin, my mother's silence. It was like a wound that wouldn't close. By morning, I knew I couldn't just sit with it. I needed answers. I found my father in his study, the place where he handled all important matters. He was at his desk, reading through papers, glasses perched on his nose. I stood in the doorway for a moment, unsure if I even belonged there. Finally, I stepped in. "Dad," I said quietly, "can we talk?" He looked up, his expression calm but not warm. "What is it, Michael?" "I'm busy." I took a deep breath. "Last night, the announcement about Daniel. I don't understand. I've been here for years, working, giving everything to this business. I thought," my voice caught, but I pushed on. "I thought I would be considered." My father leaned back in his chair, studying me the way he did when he was about to deliver a verdict. "Michael," he said, his tone firm but almost detached, "you're dependable. You're steady. But you're not a leader." The words hit harder than I expected. "Not a leader?" I repeated. "You're too soft," he continued. "You think too much, you worry too much about feeling. A CEO needs boldness, vision, the ability to make hard calls without hesitation. Daniel has that. You don't." I stood there frozen. Years of effort, years of sacrifice, and this was what it came down to. "So all this time," I whispered, "everything I've done, it didn't matter?" He sighed, as if I were a child who didn't understand. "Of course it mattered. You kept things stable. But stability isn't leadership. You're meant to support, not lead. That's your place." I wanted to argue, to shout, to demand he see me. But his eyes were already back on his papers. The conversation finished in his mind. I walked out of that room with my chest tight, my head spinning. I had thought loyalty would count for something. I had thought family meant fairness. But my father's words made it clear. Loyalty meant nothing. At the office, the change was immediate. Daniel walked in as if the place belonged to him. He held meetings, gave orders, made decisions without consulting anyone. I watched as employees who used to turn to me now nodded at him instead. Some looked uncertain, but they followed anyway. He carried himself with that same smug confidence, like the crown had always been meant for him. I tried to stay professional, to remind myself I still had a role to play, but inside I was unraveling. Every time Daniel dismissed an idea of mine, every time he laughed loudly in the hallway, every time my parents praised him for things I had been doing quietly for years, the weight grew heavier. At night, I lay awake wondering what choice I had left. Leaving felt like betrayal, but staying felt like slowly drowning. Family or dignity? Which mattered more? I had built my whole life on the belief that they would one day see me, recognize me, choose me. Now I knew they never would. The hardest part wasn't Daniel's smugness, or even my father's cold words. The hardest part was realizing I had built my entire identity around people who would never truly see me. That truth sat heavy in my chest, pressing harder each day. And though I tried to ignore it, I could feel something inside me beginning to break. At first, I told myself I could live with it. Daniel was CEO now, fine. I would keep my head down, do my work, and maybe, just maybe, things would balance out. But it didn't take long before I realized Daniel wasn't just stepping into the role. He was using it to push me down. In meetings, I would present ideas I had worked on for weeks. I'd stand, go over details, try to explain how the company could improve certain systems, save costs, or build stronger relationships with clients. The room would be quiet, a few people nodding as I spoke. Then Daniel would lean back in his chair, smirk, and cut me off. "Michael, you always think too small," he'd say in front of everyone. "We don't need safe ideas. We need bold moves. This is why Dad put me in charge. Leave the strategy to me." Sometimes minutes later, he'd rephrase the same idea I had just shared, only louder, more dramatic. Suddenly, the room would light up with approval. "That's brilliant, Daniel," someone would say. I would sit there in silence, anger burning in my chest, my voice trapped inside me. It wasn't just once. It became a pattern. Every time I tried to contribute, Daniel found a way to make me look small. Sometimes he laughed at me outright. "You're still thinking like an assistant," he said one morning when I challenged one of his risky decisions. "I'm the CEO now. If you can't keep up, maybe step aside." The room had gone quiet after he said that, eyes shifting between us, but no one defended me. No one dared. He was the boss now, and I was just the older brother who had been passed over. Those humiliations followed me home. At family dinners, it was no better. My father would ask Daniel about new projects, praising his bold leadership. My mother would smile proudly, hanging on his every word. If I tried to speak up, Daniel would interrupt, and my parents would let him. When I pointed out problems with his ideas, my father would sigh. Michael, stop being so negative. Support your brother. It felt like every dinner became another battlefield where I was destined to lose. The air was thick with unspoken things. I would sit there, quiet, chewing food that tasted like nothing, while Daniel boasted about deals he hadn't even finished. I began to dread those meals, the way my parents' eyes slid past me as though I was just furniture in the room. The worst was one night when Daniel told a story about a deal he claimed he closed. I knew for a fact it wasn't true. I had been the one who saved it behind the scenes. But when I tried to say something, my father cut me off. Michael, don't spoil the moment. Let your brother have his success. Let him have it, even when it wasn't his. It was crushing. I felt smaller and smaller each day, like I was fading from my own light. The only person I could talk to was Anna, my girlfriend. She had been with me for years, seen me through long nights and quiet struggles. One evening, after another painful dinner, I sat in her apartment, slumped on the couch. She made tea and sat across from me, studying my face. You can't keep doing this to yourself, she said softly. I rubbed my hands over my face. What choice do I have? It's my family. It's the company. I've given everything to it. I can't just walk away. She leaned closer. But they don't see you, Michael. They never have. You keep waiting for their approval, for them to finally recognize what you've done, but they won't. Not because you're not enough, but because they've already decided who you are to them. Her words cut deep because they were true. I wanted to deny it, but I couldn't. She reached out, took my hand. You have to see yourself, even if they never do. If you don't, you'll lose yourself completely. I sat there in silence, her hand warm in mine. For the first time, I let myself imagine a life outside of their shadows. But the thought terrified me. Who was I without the family business? I had built my whole identity around it, around proving myself to my parents. To leave it felt like tearing out a part of myself. Yet, seeds had been planted. Her words stayed with me, echoing in the quiet moments, in the long nights when I stared at the ceiling wondering what my life was becoming. At work, Daniel grew bolder, making reckless choices, spending money on projects that looked flashy, but had no real plan. When I tried to warn him, he laughed. Relax, Michael. You worry too much. That's why you could never lead. Each time he said it, the weight inside me shifted. I started to wonder if maybe Anna was right. Maybe I was wasting my life waiting for people who would never change. But fear held me back. Fear of leaving. Fear of failing. Fear of standing alone without the family name behind me. Still, beneath that fear, something else was slowly building. It happened late one night at the office. Most of the staff had gone home. The halls quiet except for the hum of the lights. I was finishing up reports when I noticed a set of files on Daniel's desk. He had left them open, carelessly, as if he had nothing to hide. Out of habit, I glanced at them. What I saw made my stomach turn. The numbers didn't add up. Funds had been moved around, accounts drained, money shifted into places that didn't belong to the company at all. At first, I thought it was a mistake, but the deeper I looked, the clearer it became. Daniel had been covering losses with false reports, hiding debts, making everything look better than it was. On paper, the company looked strong. In reality, it was sinking. I felt cold all over. Years of sacrifice, of loyalty, and here was Daniel risking everything for his own gain. I sat there for a long time, staring at the evidence, my heart pounding in my chest. The next morning, I confronted him. I walked into his office, the folder of papers in my hand. He was on the phone, laughing loudly, feet up on the desk like he owned the world. When he saw me, his smile didn't fade. We need to talk, I said, my voice steady but tight. He hung up without a care. What's the problem now, Michael? Still upset about being in second place. I dropped the folder on his desk. I know what you're doing. You've been hiding losses, moving money around. Do you realize what could happen if this comes out? You're putting the whole company at risk. For a moment, his face was blank. Then he laughed, leaning back in his chair. You went through my files? Wow, I should have guessed. Always the loyal little watchdog. This isn't a joke, I snapped. If the board sees this, if the clients find out, they won't. He cut me off, his tone sharp now. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. You think you've found some big secret? You think this makes you important? Listen to me, Michael. Even if you run to mom and dad with this, they'll never believe you. They'll protect me. They always have. You're nothing but a backup in this family, and you always will be. His words hit like a hammer. My fists clenched at my sides. Do you hear yourself? You're risking everything our parents built, everything I've worked for. No, he interrupted, smirking again. I'm the one who's building something. You're just there, watching, supporting. Like always, something inside me snapped. All the years of silence, of swallowing my anger, of burying the truth, it all came rushing out. I gave up my life for this family. I shouted. I gave up my dreams, my time, my future, everything, because I thought it mattered. Because I thought they would see me, respect me. And you? You've done nothing but take and waste, and they call you a leader. They hand you everything while I'm left in the shadows. Do you know what that feels like, Daniel? To be invisible in your own family. He didn't flinch. He just smiled wider, crueler. It feels like exactly what you deserve. My chest burned, my hands shaking with rage. For a moment, I wanted to hit him, to wipe that smug look off his face. But instead, I picked up the folder again and held it tight. This isn't over, I said, my voice low but firm. If you keep hiding this, if you keep dragging the company down, I will expose you. Mom and Dad won't be able to protect you forever. The truth will. His smirk faltered for just a second, but he quickly covered it with a laugh. You don't have the guts. I turned and walked out, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. For the first time, I didn't feel like the quiet, invisible son. I felt like a man with power, even if it was only the power to finally speak the truth. That night, the house was tense. My parents could sense something had shifted, but no one said a word at the dinner table. I sat there in silence, Daniel across from me, his smug smile smaller than usual. My father asked him about work. My mother praised him for handling things so well. I wanted to shout, to lay everything bare, but I stayed quiet, for now. The fracture was there, though sharp and undeniable, and I knew it wouldn't stay hidden much longer. The days after my fight with Daniel felt heavy, like the air itself was pressing down on me. I kept waiting for my father to call me in, for my mother to ask what was wrong, for someone to finally notice the storm that was brewing. But no one did. Life in the family moved on as if nothing had happened. Daniel strutted around the office, smiling, making big promises, while I carried the weight of what I knew. One night, after another long day of watching him tear through the company, I sat in my apartment with Anna. I told her everything, the files, the money, the lies. She listened quietly, her eyes steady on me. When I finished, I felt drained, like I had poured out the last of myself. You can't stay there, she said finally. I shook my head. It's my family's business. If I walk away, what do I have left? Who am I without it? You're Michael, she said firmly. You're more than that company. You're more than their shadow. But you'll never see it if you keep letting them define you. Her words stayed with me. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in my life, I asked myself what I wanted. Not my father, not my mother, not Daniel. Just me. The answer was terrifying, but also freeing. I wanted out. The next morning, I walked into the office with a resignation letter in my hand. My father called me into his office when he heard. He looked at the paper, then at me, frowning. What is this? I'm leaving, I said simply. I can't do this anymore. You're upset. Don't be foolish, Michael. This company needs you to support Daniel. I met his eyes. No, Dad. You don't need me. You never did. You only needed someone to hold things together while Daniel got the glory. I won't play that part anymore. For once, he didn't have a quick answer. He just stared at me, stunned, as if he hadn't expected me to ever step out of line. Daniel laughed when he heard. Good, he said smugly. Less dead weight around here. I didn't respond. I just walked out of that building, my chest tight, my hands trembling. It felt like tearing away from the only life I had ever known. But as painful as it was, it also felt like breathing for the first time. The weeks after were hard. I had no clear plan, no steady income. I took small jobs here and there, using the skills I had built over the years. It wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't easy. But each day, I felt a little lighter, a little stronger. I was no longer waiting for anyone to see me. I was learning to see myself. Then came the calls. Quiet at first, then louder. Whispers from the company reached me through old contacts. Daniel's decisions were backfiring. Money was vanishing, clients were leaving, and the board was growing restless. My parents tried to cover it up, but the cracks were too wide. One evening, my mother called. Her voice was soft, almost pleading. Michael, maybe you could come back, help your brother steady things. You've always been so reliable. I closed my eyes, listening to the desperation in her tone. For years, I had longed to hear her say I was needed. But now it was too late. I'm sorry, Mom, I said gently. I can't. I'm building something of my own. There was silence on the line before she whispered, we should have seen you sooner. When the call ended, I sat quietly for a long time. The pain was still there, the ache of years spent invisible, but it no longer defined me. I was more than their neglect, more than Daniel's shadow. I didn't know exactly where my new path would lead, but for the first time it was mine. And that was enough. I sometimes walk past the old office building on my way to new meetings. The glass walls shine the same way they always did, but it feels like a different world now. A world I once gave everything to, only to be told I wasn't enough. For a long time, that thought haunted me. But distance has changed me. The betrayal still hurts. I won't pretend it doesn't. Some nights, I still think about that dinner table, my father's cold words, Daniel's smirk, my mother's silence. The wound is there, and maybe it always will be. Yet, strangely, I've come to see it as a gift, because it forced me to step away. It pushed me to stop waiting for their approval and finally choose myself. I'm not rich, not powerful, not yet. But every small step I take on my own feels more honest than all those years of sacrifice in their shadow. I've built something they can't take away, self-respect. And that's worth more than any title they could have handed me. Family can give you life, but they can also chain you. Sometimes love blinds you to the truth. But I've learned that real strength begins the moment you stop begging to be seen and start seeing yourself. And so, even with the scars, I walk forward lighter. I may not have their crown, but I finally have my freedom. And in the end, that's the only power I ever needed. Hey besties. Thanks for watching till the end. Michael gave his whole life to the family business, only to be betrayed when his parents chose his reckless brother as CEO. Humiliated and overlooked, he finally walked away, built his own path, and found freedom and self-respect. If you love this story, don't forget to like, share,